I arriba un moment també molt esperat per tots. Vinguda des dels Estats Units, tenim l'honor de rebre una de les periodistes d'investigació més reputades del món. La seva feina, al costat de Megan Twohey, va permetre destapar dècades d'abusos sexuals per part del productor cinematogràfic Harvey Weinstein. I allò va ser la llavor, si us recordeu, després del moviment Me Too, que ha tingut reverberacions arreu del món i pel qual, per aquesta investigació, va guanyar el Premi Pulitzer a Servei Públic l'any 2018. És coautora del llibre She Said i autora també del llibre The Obamas. També ha denunciat pràctiques laborals abusives en grans corporacions, com és el cas de Starbucks o d'Amazon, i això ha propiciat canvis legals i canvis socials també als Estats Units. En els últims anys ha centrat la seva feina en el Tribunal Suprem del seu país, investigant qüestions relacionades amb els drets civils i amb la democràcia. Demano que rebem amb un fort aplaudiment Jodi Kantor.
Hi there. I feel so thrilled and honored that you brought me here to Barcelona to celebrate the release of the new Rosalia album. But of course, I'm kidding. I'm deeply honored and thrilled to be here in Barcelona with, frankly, what feels like family. The bonds between journalists across the world are so strong. There are many, many, many things I love about being a journalist, but one of my absolute favorite is the experience we've all had of meeting a journalist in another country who initially seems like a stranger, and then 5 minutes later, you feel that you are peers, you feel that you are friends, and you even feel that you are family, because the things that bond us together are so powerful. The curiosity, the love of words and of language, the commitment to the truth, the hope that journalism will somehow make things better, the desire to confront very difficult issues in very productive ways, the desire to understand the human experience, the desire to not just educate our audiences, but actually to thrill them, to give them new things to think about, and the feeling that our craft, even in these troubled times, is still one of the best ways we have to understand and to process the world. Last night, I was lucky enough to have dinner with about 12 of you, and it was just immediately clear around the dinner table that even as we go back and forth between English and Catalan and Spanish at this gathering, and even with all of our differences, our enterprise is exactly the same. And so, of course, are our problems. And this is the really difficult assignment that you gave me today, which is to discuss the challenges of open journalism in this day and age. Challenges that are so overwhelming that I don't need to spend any time in this speech explaining them. Every journalist lives with these challenges every single day. They're present at the New York Times. They are present in Barcelona. They have become part of the fabric of who we are and how we do our jobs. But for the next few minutes, I want to ask a series of questions that may bring some perspective on these challenges from New York and help us think through how we're going to face them. The first question I want to ask is a little bit difficult and a little bit painful for me, but I feel that it has to be faced. 1 month ago, on October 5th, was the 8th anniversary of the publication of the Harvey Weinstein story. It's been 8 years, incredibly enough. I think everybody here knows what happened, but maybe it's just worth mentioning. Basically, Megan Twohey and I were investigating the question of whether Harvey Weinstein an incredibly famous and powerful Hollywood movie producer, kind of a king of Hollywood who had crafted so many careers of so many different actors, of whether he had crossed a line with women. What we found was shocking. It was shocking that it happened, and it was shocking that so many people had worked with Weinstein over the years to hide the truth. When we published this story, we had no idea what was going to happen. As one of our editors, I assume editors in Spain are skeptical, just the way editors in New York are. And as one of our editors, said throughout the investigation, Harvey Weinstein is not that famous. And he also said, what's so surprising at the end of the day about a sleazy Hollywood producer mistreating women? He was pushing us to articulate what was surprising about the story, which is that even some of the most famous and powerful actresses in the world had this terrible secret that they had been hiding for many years. What happened when we published was astonishing and continues to be astonishing to us to this day. It started as one story in one newspaper, and it spread as a global reckoning that continues to this day. It became a collective project within journalism that continues right here. Is there, I think the journalist who just did the amazing work in El País about the Spanish film director is here? Yeah? Hi! So there is a direct line, I think, from our work to yours, and we are proud and grateful that journalists around the world continue to explore this issue. But the very difficult question I want to ask here today is, if the Weinstein story was being published now, in 2025 instead of 2017, would it have the same impact? So let's review some of the factors that gave that story so much impact one by one, and let's compare the situation in 2017 to the one we live with today. So to start with, the New York Times is the same, maybe even stronger. We have more paid subscribers. Definitely the same institutional commitment to telling the hard stories and standing up to the vulnerable. We have more ways of reaching our audience than ever before. So I think the New York Times would do just as good a job with this story as we did in 2017. Would women say yes to coming forward? It's one of the hardest dilemmas in journalism. I think it's universal. I think it's eternal. I think it doesn't really change from 2017 to 2025. It's just an unfortunate bind that women who did nothing to invite being sexually harassed or being assaulted years later have to face the difficult choice of whether to come forward about those offenses. It's always scary. It's never easy. There's never any guarantee that there won't be reprisal, that they'll be treated well. I think the question of whether somebody who has experienced something difficult is willing to come forward or not is just, it is a core struggle of journalism and in our work, and I don't think it has changed that much from 2017 to 2025. One thing that I think is also the same is the incredible potency of those sources to make a difference. If right here and right now we gathered the number of people who in the end gave Megan and I really vital information for the Weinstein story, they would form a very small cluster on this stage. One of the miracles of that story and so many other stories is that it takes such a small number of honest, brave sources to make an enormous impact. One truth teller, two truth tellers, 3 truth tellers who share vital information can have an enormous effect all over the country, all over the world. I think that is still true. Now, as you may know, Weinstein did some really dirty things to try to stop us. Not only did he put up a legal fight with our story, not only did he throw a whole bunch of PR people at us, but he did some deceptive behind the scenes things to try to stop the story. For example, he hired a firm called Black Cube, consisting of Israeli ex-military intelligence agents, and he hired them to try to dupe me and Megan and our sources and to try to stop the story. This was all happening in secret at the time, but what we learned later is that our story literally had a bounty on it. Black Cube was going to be paid $400,000 if our story did not appear in the New York Times. The lengths that this firm went to try to deceive us were incredible. One of their agents posed as a women's rights advocate and approached me and some of the sources and tried to get us to give her information. Luckily, I did not fall for this, as journalists were trained to be very skeptical of anyone who comes to us who seems fishy, who seems suspicious. But some of the women who were affected did speak to this agent and share information. My fear is that that kind of deception would be much easier now than it was in 2017. The ability to instantly produce totally fake things on the internet, to manufacture credible looking sources that in fact are completely duplicitous, the ability to hide who you really are, the ability to get outsiders to believe it. Weinstein's duplicity was aimed mostly at us, at trying to trick the journalists and the sources. What if before the story was published, he would have been able to conduct a misinformation campaign aimed at undermining the story? As you know, this is easy to do now. It is cheap to do now. It is a regular tactic that is used. What effect would that have had on the impact of the story? It's very, very worrying. Now, let's look at another factor, which is the fact that Megan and I, in breaking the story, were able to build a lot of factual consensus about what happened. Before we went to press, we tried to make sure with our editors that the story was very strong. We had 25 years worth of allegations that we had documented. For example, take the Peninsula Hotel in Beverly Hills. We had stories from Ashley Judd, and a few days later, Gwyneth Paltrow also went on the record, documenting that Harvey Weinstein had sexually harassed them at the Peninsula Hotel in Beverly Hills in the late 90s. We also had a documented incident that had taken place at the Beverly Hills Peninsula Hotel in 2015, only 2 years before we reported the story. And so we could see that this history had gone on and on and on uninterrupted. And we were able to show the reader that in the very first story. We had women on the record. We had human resources memos, in internal company documentation. We had the legal and financial trail of the settlements that Weinstein, the money that Weinstein had paid out to women, 8 to 12 settlements over the years to silence women. So when we presented this story to the world, we had a mountain of fact to show them. The evidence was completely overwhelming. There was no debate when the story was published about whether it had happened or not. The debate was about why it had been allowed to happen, about the moral horror of the Weinstein story, which is that not only did no one stop Weinstein, but there were so many powerful people in Hollywood, in the legal profession, who helped Weinstein instead of helping the vulnerable victims. Now, when you think about that kind of evidence and putting it in the paper, I have to wonder, how would it be received now as opposed to in 2025? I can't be sure. I hope that it would be believed. The facts were there. We did all of the things that journalists are supposed to do. We showed our work. Would the public have believed us as strongly as they did then? I don't know. It's a hypothetical. I can't answer the question. Something else that made the story very powerful was the dialogue that took place between journalism and social media. Many of you probably remember this. There was an amazing, as you know, journalism and social media are often at odds. It's an uncomfortable relationship at the end of the day. But in this story, they work together beautifully, because what happened is that journalists, first us with the Weinstein story, but then journalists writing about other men, stories that cropped up in publications all over the world, we were reporting the facts in the newspaper, but then on social media, women rose up to say, I recognize that behavior. I've experienced that too. There were women who, across the world, globally, who read the Weinstein story and said, I have nothing to do with Hollywood. I've never worked in the movie business, but when I read about Harvey Weinstein, I am reading about the behavior of my first boss who did the same thing to me. So there was this incredible dialogue, this trust, this recognition, this sharing of common experience that made the Me Too movement so powerful at its peak. Could that take place today? I'm not so sure. Here's why. Social media is very different than it was in 2017. In 2017, Twitter felt more like a neutral public square. Of course, it had corporate ownership, but the only aim of its corporation, it seemed like, was to create conversations and share information. Twitter is now in the hands of a highly political, highly ideological actor, Elon Musk. The conversation there has changed. It no longer feels like the central gathering place for this fascinating collision of journalism and personal experience and other information. It feels political. Social media is splintered. The conversation isn't in one place anymore. It's on Facebook and WhatsApp and Blue Sky and Threads and Twitter and a zillion other platforms, TikTok. It doesn't feel like we are having one common conversation anymore. So even if our story was successful in this hypothetical, even if it was well read, would the public conversation about it, the kind of meeting of women from all over the world to share notes about what had happened to them, be so powerful? I don't think so, and that is a big part of what gave our story impact. Another part of what gave our story so much impact was that our work was furthered and amplified by other journalists. You know, what used to happen when a big story was published, a really big scoop, is that every journalist, every organization in some way ran onto the field, right? This is like the classic pattern of what can happen with a great scoop in Washington, D.C. The New York Times or the Washington Post will break a big story, but then CNN will make a contribution, and Bloomberg will make a contribution, and CBS and NBC will make contributions, and Politico and The Hill will make contributions. And on the one hand, it's very competitive, but on the other hand, it's collective. It's like a game of football in which everybody is kicking the ball of information a little further down the field. That doesn't happen in quite the same way today as it did, I think, in 2017. I think because journalistic organizations are more strapped, because in general the field has weakened, when there's a big scoop, it's not always the case, I think, that you have as many forces coming from as many directions to propel the journalism as far as it can go. It still happens, but maybe not quite as quickly or strongly or forcefully. So would the Weinstein story have the same force today that it did in 2017? We can't know. It's a hypothetical question. Maybe there are things that would come along to make it more powerful. But for me, it's a frame for the questions we are discussing today, for our collective concerns that we share, stretching from New York to Barcelona to the rest of the world. And the reason I'm telling that story and asking that question today at your Congress is that I want to make a bigger point, which is to say that the stakes of this conversation are so incredibly high. We tend to talk about what it will mean for journalism, what it will mean for our business, what it will mean for our audiences, our viewers, our readers, what it will mean for the young journalists who are starting today. But in fact, what is at stake is far, far, far larger. Progress for women, progress for anyone on any topic in any field depends on having correct information and solid fact, on having a shared version of reality. You can't solve a problem, any problem, that you can't see, and you can't have a good, interesting, fresh, meaningful, vital debate if you're not at least starting with a common version, a shared version of what the facts are and what happened. That, to me, is the really hard question. So I want to make 2 points as potential suggestions and solutions. Listen, it's hard. There's no way of getting up here and pretending that I have all the answers, because the questions that our industry is facing are so monumental. They're bigger than any of us. But I have two suggestions of things we can do and also kind of ways to think about the problem. One is to really recognize that even as we tend to worry about the newspaper business or the TV business or the magazine business, the problem is really much, much, much bigger than that. The problem to me is that we do not yet have a plan in the US or in Spain or across the world to save the truth. And this is what I mean. The truth was already in trouble in 2017 when we reported the Weinstein story, but now obviously the peril to the truth is much, much greater. Facts, knowledge, our shared sense of reality, they're all endangered. The thing I think about every day, and I especially think about here while visiting Barcelona, is that we don't even have a collective plan for saving the truth. For comparison, if you look at the climate crisis, here's where we are. Thanks to scientists all over the globe, including here in Spain, we have a roadmap for saving the planet, starting with lowering CO2 emissions. We don't yet have the global political cohesion and will to do it, but we do at least know what would be necessary to stabilize the environment. When it comes to our information environment, which is also vital to our well-being, also a basis for everything we do, and yet also polluted and rapidly decaying, I would like all of us collectively to have a strategy for how we get to a new and more stable place. It's a very hard question. An individual journalist can't really tackle it. I would even say that an individual publication can't tackle it. As powerful as the New York Times is, it takes most of the energy of the New York Times just to be the New York Times. This is something that is bigger than all of us and that we have to address together. My second and final suggestion is an invitation to all of you not to give up on the hardest stories. I'm an investigative journalist. That's what I do. I honor and appreciate my colleague and those of you in this room who do such a great and beautiful and hard and necessary job of narrating what happened day to day. I understand that there is some interest in Barcelona in Zoran Mamdani, the new mayor of New York. Telling that story, watching what he's doing, of course, very, very important. But my people are doing something different. Investigative journalism, as you know, is the project of looking beyond the news to ask the very delicate and deep and difficult questions that are not already in the public sphere. Sometimes they're about things that we're not talking about. They're usually about documenting some harm, or sometimes they're just about scrutinizing power. My current focus in my reporting job in the US is on the United States Supreme Court. I'm trying to establish an independent lens through which we can see the justices, the 9 people who decide the law. Even though the Supreme Court is at the center of public life in the US, it's very hard to see because it operates almost entirely in secret. Everyone who works there takes a vow of silence. There are no visitor logs. Public records laws don't apply. The justices' papers remain sealed for many decades after they're on the bench. In other words, it's a locked box. But because job one in journalism is to scrutinize power, I have made it my mission for the past 3 years to try to open that locked box a little. It's been a thrilling project because we've gained new understanding. We have been able to do stories that we've put in the paper. And because even as journalism is on the defensive, even as our industry tackles all of these challenges, we're still able to find and uncover new information. And when we do that, when we take the Harvey Weinstein story, when we take a disturbing story about a Spanish director, when we're able to extract information on the Supreme Court, when we're able to publish powerful investigative scoops, we are making a statement to the world, not only about the thing that we're talking about the safety of women or about the law, but we are making a bigger statement that says, this is what journalism really does. This is the service that we are truly providing. We are going beyond what is known. We are altering the ledger of what is public and what is secret. And we are taking information and secrets that are in the public interest, and we are bringing them into the light for everyone to see. The last thing I'll say is that another reason to do investigative stories is that they are such a thrill. When Megan and I meet with student audiences, they always ask us the same thing. They say, the first question almost inevitably is, how did you bear the trauma of the Weinstein story? Did you suffer? How did you live with that material? And we say to them, of course we cried in private over the terrible things that had been done to these women. But then we say, what you may not understand is that because the material was so terrible, because we cried, because the women suffered, the day you get to confront Harvey Weinstein at the office is the best day at work ever. So on that note, I want to thank you. I want to leave you. I want to say that we're family. We're connected. We understand each other perfectly. You have not only my gratitude for being able to visit you here in Barcelona, but you have all of my luck and my encouragement and my confidence for the very difficult challenges ahead. Thank you so much.
Stay here, stay here.
Oh, I have to go that way.
Thank you, Jodi, for such inspiring words. We have a few minutes, not many, but just a few minutes for questions coming from the audience. Si teniu alguna pregunta per la Jodi, aprofitant que la tenim aquí i aprofitant que tenim un auditori ple de periodistes, seria pràcticament una obscenitat. Anem justets de temps, però intentarem encabir-hi el que puguem. No sé si algú té alguna pregunta. Les podeu fer en català o en anglès. La Jodi té traducció simultània. Bé, doncs, li llenço jo una pregunta. Jodi, després del Me Too, moltes redaccions han revisat els seus protocols d'abús i de poder. Creus que el periodisme ha après, que hem après a ser crítics amb nosaltres mateixos?
The translation machine is not working, so do you mind repeating the question in English?
Okay. I'll ask it in English. After Me Too, many newsrooms revisited their policies on abuse and power. Do you think that journalism has truly learned to look critically at itself?
Oh, that's a great question. Do I think that journalism truly took a look at itself, especially with regard to Me Too issues? In 2017, certainly. I mean, what happened in the US was a moment of workplace accounting without precedent. We had never experienced anything like it. It was a mass accountability event in which men from so many powerful organizations were fired or had to quit because of very real and well-supported allegations that women came forward about after being silent for many, many years. I think the question, and it's a question in every industry, not just journalism, is how to continue that sense of standards and of scrutiny. I do think the rules of the workplace have changed. I know that my newsroom is different, that there are things that would have been tolerated or waved away many years ago that are now taken very, very, very seriously. But the problems of how women can come forward and how organizations can deal with the issue, they're really hard problems. For instance, if there's a journalist, whether it's in the US or Spain, if there's a female journalist who's been sexually harassed but doesn't want coming forward to affect her career, right? Mm-hmm. Wants to continue on her career path with privacy and without this taking her off her path. The question of how any organization can provide her a truly private but also effective way to come forward is a very difficult issue. I think the issue of punishment and accountability is also really complex because, you know, the most serious incidents are in a way the easiest. If somebody in one of our newsrooms commits assault, there's no question that that person has to be fired, right? But what about the kind of gray area incidents? If somebody gets drunk at the Christmas party and does something really inappropriate, but then apologizes for it very strongly the next day. Is that a firing offense? Is that not? What are the rules? How do we work these things out? These are very, very hard human resources questions, and I don't think the post-Me Too period, it made us more aware, but it didn't instantly solve the dilemmas of dealing with these problems.
Una pregunta. Res, us demano molta brevetat perquè el programa del dia està una miqueta apretadet.
Oh, thanks.
El micròfon, si algú li pot acostar? Hi havia algun micròfon, 2 micròfons a la sala?
Hola. Aquí a la dreta vostra. Quants temes, quantes investigacions alhora pots dur a terme per no perdre el focus i alhora per tenir la sensació que estàs produint, que estàs treballant? Quants temes pots portar alhora, investigar alhora?
So I heard, hold on, it's a little too loud, so I'm going to take it out. I heard your question perfectly in Spanish, but not in English. Does someone mind translating?
I'll translate. He was asking how many investigations could you handle at the same time, not to lose the focus on the question.
Usually with investigations are so intense that I can usually do one at a time, but so the way it works now at the Times is that we have an investigations department. It's run by 3 editors. They're probably about 15 or 20 investigative reporters. And then there are other investigative units throughout the paper. Here in Europe, we have an investigative team. We have a business investigations team. We have a New York City investigations team. And so we're able to handle a lot of complex investigations at once. And I understand we're out of time, so I'll finish with this. Planning an investigation is like making an investment, right? Because you never know how it's going to turn out. It's by nature paradoxical. You're looking into something that nobody understands. So it's impossible to make a perfect prediction of how it's going to turn out. What I think we have been able to do, at the start of the Weinstein story, I didn't know whether he had ever crossed a line with women or not. I was completely open-minded about it. What I think I've been able to do over the course of my career, and what I think the New York Times has been able to do, is refine a system for how to invest in which investigations to maximize the chances that we are using our time and our resources well, and that we are investigating things that have a high likelihood of yielding. So I understand that you need to go on with the rest of your program, but if you ever want to bring me back to Barcelona to discuss that topic and to discuss how to choose and invest in and pursue serious investigations, I will be right back here immediately. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Jodi.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Okay. Ens hem quedat sense temps, vosaltres sabeu millor que ningú què significa, això? Per cert, que dèiem que Jodi Kantor és coautora amb Megan Tui del llibre She Said, que sapigueu que el podeu trobar, si us interessa, a la llibreria d'aquí fora durant tot el cap de setmana.